What I'm about to tell you will destroy everything you thought you knew about Game of Thrones. I almost didn't publish this. My editor begged me not to. 3 different HBO consultants told me I was reading too much into it. But after discovering what I found buried in George R.R. Martin's text, I realized I had a responsibility to share the truth. You've been lied to. We all have. For over a decade, millions of fans have accepted one of the biggest deceptions in fantasy literature. We've swallowed a lie so perfectly crafted, so elegantly disguised, that even the smartest theorists missed it completely. And once you see what I'm about to show you, you'll never watch another Varys scene the same way again. I'm talking about Varys, the Spider, the Eunuch, the master of whispers who claims he serves the realm. Except here's the thing nobody wants you to know. Varys might not be a eunuch at all. I know what you're thinking. That's impossible. He literally tells us his origin story. We see him interact with everyone as a eunuch. This is just another crazy fan theory. But what if I told you that everything, and I mean everything, about Varys makes perfect sense once you realize he's been playing the longest con in Westeros history? What if the evidence has been hiding in plain sight this entire time, and we've been too distracted by dragons and ice zombies to notice? Don't click away. Don't dismiss this as nonsense. Because in the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through a chain of evidence so damning, so perfectly interconnected, that you'll question your own eyes when you rewatch the series. This isn't about shock value. This isn't about getting clicks. This is about uncovering a truth so massive that it reframes the entire story of Westeros. A truth that reveals Varys isn't just a liar about his anatomy. He's been orchestrating the ultimate Game of Thrones from the very beginning. And if you think you know how deep this conspiracy goes, you're not even close. Westeros' best-kept secret. Varys has always presented himself as a eunuch. From his first appearance in Aerys, the Mad King's court, to his final moments serving Daenerys Targaryen, he maintained this identity. But what if it was all an elaborately constructed lie? What if Varys' castration was just another one of his masks, another disguise in his infinite arsenal of deceptions? To understand this explosive possibility, we need to go back to the beginning. Varys was born a slave in Lys, one of the free cities known for its carnal pleasures and exotic perfumes. According to his own version, he was sold to a sorcerer who castrated him in a dark ritual, using his private parts to summon demons. A terrible story told with tears in his eyes to Tyrion Lannister in the dungeons of the Red Keep. But here's the first clue that should make us question everything. Varys is the master of manipulation. He doesn't just lie, he constructs entire realities. Every word that comes out of his mouth is calculated, every gesture is rehearsed. Why should we believe his origin story without question? Watch how he tells this story. He chooses the perfect moment. Tyrion is vulnerable, imprisoned, desperate for allies. Varys presents himself as someone who also suffered, who was also a victim. It's a strategic, emotional connection, a way to gain sympathy and trust. But masters of manipulation like Varys know that the best lies are those seasoned with truth. What if the truth was that Varys was never castrated? What if he simply adopted the eunuch identity because it provided him with incalculable advantages in Westerosi society? Think about it. Eunuchs are considered sexually harmless. They can move freely among noble women, can serve in positions of trust without arousing jealousy or suspicions of harassment. A eunuch can be present in intimate conversations, can have access to information that complete men would never obtain. For someone who lives off information, who feeds on secrets, there is no more perfect disguise, but the evidence goes far beyond strategic convenience. Let's analyze Varys' behavior over the years. He demonstrates intimate knowledge about relationships, about sexual dynamics, about the complexities of human desire. His analyses of others' weaknesses always include sexual components. How could someone who was castrated as a child have this deep and visceral understanding of adult sexuality? Remember how he manipulates Ned Stark. He perfectly understands masculine honor, pride, the need to protect family. He knows exactly which strings to pull to make Ned dance to his tune. This isn't just academic intelligence, it's deep, emotional understanding, the kind that comes from personal experience. And then we have the physical question. Varys may be soft and plump, but he doesn't exhibit the typical signs of pre-puberty castration. Eunuchs castrated before puberty develop specific characteristics: permanently high voices, absence of facial hair, altered bone structures. Varys, despite his soft voice, doesn't consistently present these signs. Even more intriguing is his physical endurance. On several occasions, we see Varys demonstrate surprising resilience. He walks long distances, endures physical stress, maintains energy even in extreme situations. Men castrated in childhood often develop health problems related to the absence of hormones. Varys seems remarkably healthy for someone with his supposed condition. But perhaps the most convincing evidence lies in something we all missed: his disguises. Varys doesn't just disguise himself occasionally. He's a complete social shapeshifter. He can transform into anyone, assume any identity. We see this when he appears disguised as a jailer to free Tyrion. The transformation is so complete that even Tyrion doesn't initially recognize him. Now, think about this. If Varys can completely change his appearance, his voice, his posture, why couldn't he simulate the effects of castration? A man with his skills could certainly create the physical illusion necessary to sustain his lie. And here we come to the crucial point that will change your perspective forever. Varys was never actually physically examined by someone trustworthy in the series. We never see medical confirmation of his condition. All we have is his word. And Varys' word is worth about as much as an Iron Islander's coin. But why would he maintain this charade for so long? The answer lies in power. Varys doesn't seek traditional power. He doesn't want to sit on the Iron Throne, doesn't want to lead armies. He wants something much more valuable: total control of information. And for that, he needs to be underestimated, needs to be seen as harmless, needs his enemies to let their guard down. The eunuch identity isn't just protection, it's his most powerful weapon. It allows him to move invisibly through power circles, collecting secrets that other men could never access. It's the perfect camouflage for the perfect spy. But if this theory is correct, the implications are devastating for everything we think we know about Westerosi politics. The web of lies unravels. If Varys really isn't a eunuch, then we need to re-examine each of his actions under a completely new light. And when we do this, disturbing patterns begin to emerge. Patterns that reveal not just his lies, but a much more sinister plan than we ever imagined. First, let's talk about his little birds. Varys' spy network is composed mainly of children, orphans, street boys and girls that he supposedly saves from misery. He claims he cuts their tongues so they can't reveal secrets, but treats them well, giving them food, shelter and purpose. But what if the reality is much darker? A sexually functional man having unrestricted access to vulnerable children, controlling them through emotional and physical dependence, keeping them isolated from the outside world. Does this sound familiar? It sounds like the classic profile of a predator. The tongue mutilation wouldn't just be to keep secrets, it would be to ensure that his victims could never tell what really happens in the secret tunnels beneath the Red Keep. The children can't speak about what they experience, can't denounce, can't ask for help. They are perfectly vulnerable and completely dependent on Varys. And observe how he talks about these children. There's a disturbing possessiveness in his words, a way of referring to them as his birds, as if they were property. For someone who claims to have suffered abuse in childhood, he has replicated the same system of control and exploitation that supposedly victimized him. But the evidence goes far beyond speculation about his spy network. Let's examine his alliances and betrayals through this new lens. If Varys isn't really a eunuch, then his motivations aren't what he claims. He's not serving the realm out of altruism. He's building something much more personal and much more dangerous. Consider his loyalty to Aegon, the supposed son of Rhaegar Targaryen. In the book version, Varys and Illyrio Mopatis have an elaborate plan to put this young man on the Iron Throne. They claim it's for the good of the Seven Kingdoms, that Aegon will be a just and wise king. But what if the truth is that Aegon isn't just a political pawn? What if he's something much more personal to Varys? Here's a theory that will shake the foundations of Westeros. What if Aegon is actually Varys's son? Not Rhaegar and Illyria's son, not a Blackfire, but literally Varys's biological son, conceived in secret, raised in Pentos, under Illyrio's protection, prepared from birth to be the perfect puppet king. Think about the timeline. Aegon would have been born around the time of Robert's Rebellion. Varys was already established as Aerys's master of whisperers. He had access to noble women, had opportunities for discreet encounters, had the resources to hide a pregnancy and birth, and most importantly, he had motives to want a biological heir on the Iron Throne. The partnership with Illyrio makes perfect sense in this context. Illyrio isn't just a political ally, he's the chosen godfather to raise Varys's son in safety, away from Westeros's prying eyes. Illyrio's wealth, his position in Pentos, his discretion, everything serves perfectly the plans of a secret father who wants to see his son in ultimate power. And observe how Varys talks about Aegon. There's genuine emotion in his voice when he discusses the young king's future. It's not the calculated coldness he demonstrates when manipulating other pawns. It's barely disguised paternal pride of a man talking about his greatest investment, not just political, but personal and genetic. But if this is true, then what about all the other people Varys manipulated and sacrificed over the years? Ned Stark, for example. Varys could have saved Ned, could have found a way to protect him. Instead, he allowed Ned to be executed because the Lord of Winterfell's death served his long-term plans. The civil war that followed weakened the Seven Kingdoms, making them more vulnerable to a Targaryen invasion led by his own son. And Daenerys. Varys initially supported her, helped arrange her marriage to Khal Drogo, facilitated her growth as a leader. But when she became too strong, when her dragons became a threat to his plan to put Aegon on the throne, he didn't hesitate to betray her. The concern about Daenerys' mental instability was just a convenient excuse to eliminate a rival to his son's reign. This would perfectly explain why Varys always seemed to be playing a different game from everyone else. While the Lannisters fought for immediate power, while the Starks fought for honor, while the Tyrells fought for influence, Varys was playing the longest game of all, the game of establishing a dynasty that he himself would control through blood ties. The diabolical genius of the plan is impressive. Aegon would never know that Varys is his true father. He would grow up believing he's a Targaryen, believing he has divine right to the throne, but he would be eternally grateful to the man who put him there, eternally dependent on Varys's advice and information network. He would be Westeros's most powerful king, but also the perfect puppet. And if Varys really isn't a eunuch, if he's sexually functional, then he could have other hidden children. Maybe he has an entire lineage prepared as backup, a secret dynasty ready to emerge when necessary. The little birds may not just be spies, some of them may be his own children, raised from birth to serve him without question. But here's the most terrible aspect of this revelation. If our theory is correct, then Varys isn't just a liar or a common political manipulator. He's a monster who built an empire of deceptions on the suffering of vulnerable children, who is willing to plunge the Seven Kingdoms into civil war to satisfy his paternal ambition, who turned Westerosi politics into his personal playground of dynastic power. And if this is true, then everything that's to come in Westeros was orchestrated by a man who was never what he claimed to be. The real Game of Thrones. Now that we've established the possibility that Varys was never really a eunuch and explored the sinister implications of this revelation, we come to the final and most crucial question. How does this change everything we know about Westeros's destiny? And more importantly, how does this perfectly explain some of the deepest mysteries of the entire saga? First, let's talk about Varys's supernatural knowledge. Throughout the entire series, he demonstrates an almost mystical ability to predict events, to always be one step ahead of his enemies. Initially, we attributed this to his spy network. But what if it's something much more fundamental? If Varys isn't a eunuch, if his origin story is fabricated, then maybe other parts of his identity are false too. What if he's not from Lys? What if he's not a former slave? What if his entire identity is an elaborate construction to hide something much more extraordinary? There's a theory that gains strength when we examine the evidence. Varys may be one of the last direct descendants of the ancient dragon lords of Valyria. Not a Targaryen, not a Blackfire, but an even older and more powerful lineage. A family that survived the doom of Valyria by staying hidden, preserving ancient knowledge that others lost. This would explain his intimate understanding of magic. Remember that he knew about Jon Snow's resurrection, about Bran Stark's powers, about the nature of the White Walkers. This knowledge doesn't come just from espionage. It comes from ancestral traditions, from books and scrolls that survived Valyria's destruction. And it would perfectly explain why he invested so much time and resources in restoring the Targaryen dynasty. Not out of altruism, not for political stability, but because he understands that only dragon blood can face the supernatural threats approaching Westeros. His manipulation of Daenerys, his support for Aegon, it's all part of a much larger plan to prepare the Seven Kingdoms for battles that go beyond human politics. But if Varys really possesses Valyrian blood, if he has access to ancient magical knowledge, then his disguise ability isn't just mundane skill. He may be using magical shape-shifting techniques, forms of bodily alteration that go far beyond cosmetics and acting. This would explain how he achieves such complete transformations, how he manages to fool even experienced observers. And if this theory is correct, then Varys's castration wasn't just a strategic lie. It was a magical necessity. Many arcane traditions require fertility sacrifices, renunciations of sexuality as the price for supernatural power. Varys may have voluntarily submitted to some ritual that made him functionally sterile, even while maintaining his physical capabilities. But here's the final twist that will blow your mind. What if Aegon really is a Targaryen, but not in the way we think? What if he's Varys' son with a Targaryen woman, maybe a bastard, maybe a distant relative kept in secret? This would explain why he has genuine Targaryen features, why Varys is so certain of his legitimacy, and why the plan is so elaborately protected. Varys' Valyrian blood, mixed with Targaryen dragon blood, would create a lineage with extraordinary magical potential. Aegon wouldn't just be a political king, he would be a sorcerer king, capable of controlling dragons, of facing supernatural threats, of ruling through power that transcends mundane politics. And this brings us to the most shocking revelation of all. If our analysis is correct, then Varys isn't the manipulative villain we thought he was. He's actually the secret hero of the entire saga. Every betrayal, every manipulation, every death he allowed or caused. It was all part of a desperate plan to save Westeros from threats that no one else understood or believed. Think about it. While everyone fought for temporary political power, Varys was preparing the Seven Kingdoms for war against forces that could destroy all civilization. While petty nobles disputed titles and lands, he was orchestrating the return of magical bloodlines capable of facing ice dragons and armies of the dead. His network of little birds wasn't just espionage. It was a communication system that could alert the entire continent about supernatural threats. His political manipulations weren't just ambition, they were military preparation on a continental scale. And his lie about being a eunuch, it was the ultimate personal sacrifice. He renounced the possibility of a normal life, of genuine relationships, of being seen and loved for who he really was. He chose to live as a ghost, as a shadow, so that others could live in sunlight. But perhaps the most convincing evidence of all lies in what happened when Varys was finally executed by Daenerys. His last words weren't of anger or despair. They were of peaceful resignation, like someone who had completed his mission, who saw his plans come to fruition, even though he couldn't witness the end. He knew that Jon Snow would discover his true identity. He knew this would create the necessary conflict to reveal Daenerys' true nature. He knew his own death would be the final catalyst for the events that would save Westeros, not just from the White Walkers, but from the tyranny of a mad queen with dragons. So, was Varys really a eunuch? The physical answer may be no, but the spiritual answer is much more complex. He castrated himself emotionally, sacrificed his humanity, renounced everything that made life worth living, all to serve a greater purpose that no one else could understand. In the end, it doesn't matter if he lied about his physical castration. What matters is that he mutilated himself in much deeper and more painful ways, transforming himself into something less than human so that humanity could survive. This is Varys' true tragedy. He was the hero no one recognized, the savior everyone despised, the man who sacrificed his soul to save the world. And maybe that's the most important lesson of the entire Song of Ice and Fire saga. Sometimes the true heroes are those who can never be celebrated, who can never be loved, who can never be truly understood. The next time you revisit the story of Westeros, remember the spider, not as the manipulator we thought we knew, but as the silent guardian who paid the highest price of all to protect a world that never knew it was being saved.